I never thought a simple Saturday afternoon could feel like the world was holding its breath. But there I was, sprawled awkwardly on the living room couch of my friend's house, pretending to scroll through my phone while stealing glances at her. Her name was Claire, mid-40s, if I had to guess, with a quiet elegance that didn't shout for attention but somehow made the room notice her anyway. She had this way of leaning against the kitchen counter, arms folded lightly, hair falling in loose waves that caught the sunlight just so. And then there were her eyes. God, her eyes. They could make a confession without a single word. I caught her looking at me once, just a flash, and she smiled, but not a casual, polite smile. There was something softer, something that made my stomach tighten, like a secret had just been shared and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to know it. My fingers fumbled with my phone. The screen blurred as I tried to act normal. We weren't alone, of course. My friend, her son, was off somewhere, leaving this strange bubble of quiet between us. I didn't know if I was allowed to feel the electricity crackling under her calm composure, but I felt it anyway. The way she moved, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, or leaning slightly closer to grab a cup of tea. It all felt intentional, though I knew it probably wasn't. I tried to focus on something else. Anything else. The sunlight on the hardwood floor, the soft hum of the fridge, the faint smell of jasmine that always seemed to follow her. But then she laughed at something I said, and I swear the sound made my chest ache. It was warm and soft, not the kind of laugh that fills a room, but the kind that fills you. There was a moment when I wanted to speak, to say something that made sense, something that would bridge the impossible gap between a 20-something kid and the woman who made me feel like I was more than I was. But my mouth went dry, my words trapped somewhere between desire and fear. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. Her eyes lingered a little too long, her hand brushing mine just a second too long when she handed me the tea. The smallest gestures, the tiniest sparks, and suddenly, I wasn't pretending anymore. I didn't know if I should feel guilty. My friend was supposed to be off limits. And yet, sitting there, watching her, every rational thought felt like it had dissolved into the air around us. She leaned in, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off her. I watched her set the mug down with a faint tremble in her hand, and I realized I hadn't truly looked at her before. Not like this. Claire wasn't just Claire, the mom of my friend who sometimes made jokes I barely laughed at. She was a story, a whole world folded into a mid-40s body that carried both grace and scars. I'd noticed the faint crease at the corner of her mouth when she smiled, the slight hesitation when she laughed too long at something she probably shouldn't have. It wasn't vanity, I could tell. She'd carried regret like a quiet companion, the kind that lingers in the eyes and makes someone feel simultaneously vulnerable and untouchable. I thought of the times she'd glanced out the window during our conversations, as if she was remembering a different life she didn't quite belong to anymore. Maybe she had a past that left her wary, a husband she'd lost interest in, or a love she'd let slip through her fingers and never found the courage to retrieve. I didn't know. I only knew that every flicker of expression drew me in, made me want to know more, even if I wasn't supposed to. As for me, I was supposed to be careful. 23, stupidly infatuated, standing on the edge of something I couldn't name. I'd had my share of flings and brief infatuations, but none of them had felt like this, like walking on the edge of a cliff with my stomach in my throat. My heart ached with longing, the kind that made my chest heavy and my thoughts intrusive. I couldn't stop noticing her, couldn't stop wondering what it would be like to feel closer. Closer than a conversation over tea or small talk about movies or work. And that's what made it so dangerous. She was my friend's mother, someone I should have admired from a safe distance, someone I should never, ever let myself feel this for. I wanted to look away, to focus on the phone in my lap or the pattern on the rug, but then she shifted closer, crossing the invisible line between familiarity and something charged. Her hand, brushing against mine as she reached for the sugar, lingered just a second too long. My pulse jumped. I pretended to cough, to hide the fact that the brush of her skin had made my fingers tingle in a way that felt impossible to forget. She looked at me, really looked, and I swear the room fell quiet. Not the awkward quiet of silence, but the quiet of understanding. An unspoken recognition that we were dancing around something neither of us had the courage or the right to name. And yet, her eyes softened when she smiled, a hint of something unguarded, something that said, "I see you." I swallowed hard. I watched her set the mug down with a faint tremble in her hand, and I realized I hadn't truly looked at her before. Not like this. Claire wasn't just Claire, the mom of my friend who sometimes made jokes I barely laughed at. She was a story, a whole world folded into a mid-40s body that carried both grace and scars. I'd noticed the faint crease at the corner of her mouth when she smiled, the slight hesitation when she laughed too long at something she probably shouldn't have. It wasn't vanity, I could tell. She'd carried regret like a quiet companion, the kind that lingers in the eyes and makes someone feel simultaneously vulnerable and untouchable. I thought of the times she'd glanced out the window during our conversations, as if she was remembering a different life she didn't quite belong to anymore. Maybe she had a past that left her wary, a husband she'd lost interest in, or a love she'd let slip through her fingers and never found the courage to retrieve. I didn't know. I only knew that every flicker of expression drew me in, made me want to know more, even if I wasn't supposed to. As for me, I was supposed to be careful. 23, stupidly infatuated, standing on the edge of something I couldn't name. I'd had my share of flings and brief infatuations, but none of them had felt like this, like walking on the edge of a cliff with my stomach in my throat. My heart ached with longing, the kind that made my chest heavy and my thoughts intrusive. I couldn't stop noticing her, couldn't stop wondering what it would be like to feel closer. Closer than a conversation over tea or small talk about movies or work. And that's what made it so dangerous. She was my friend's mother, someone I should have admired from a safe distance, someone I should never, ever let myself feel this for. I wanted to look away, to focus on the phone in my lap or the pattern on the rug, but then she shifted closer, crossing the invisible line between familiarity and something charged. Her hand, brushing against mine as she reached for the sugar, lingered just a second too long. My pulse jumped. I pretended to cough, to hide the fact that the brush of her skin had made my fingers tingle in a way that felt impossible to forget. She looked at me, really looked, and I swear the room felt quiet. Not the awkward quiet of silence, but the quiet of understanding. An unspoken recognition that we were dancing around something neither of us had the courage or the right to name. And yet, her eyes softened when she smiled, a hint of something unguarded, something that said, "I see you." I swallowed hard. I froze mid-laugh when the front door clicked open. My friend's voice floated from the hallway, carefree and unaware. Claire tensed, her hand still hovering near mine. I wanted to pull back, to disappear into the couch cushions, but my body refused. "Hey, I'm back," my friend called, dropping his backpack. "Did you guys?" He stopped, blinking at the two of us. And just like that, the spell shattered. Claire straightened, smooth as ever, but I caught the quick exhale she tried to hide. She laughed softly, nervously. "We were just talking," she said, her voice tighter than usual. My stomach twisted. Talking. Right. Nothing more than talking. My pulse was too loud, my hands too warm. Every inch of me screamed that this was more than talking. Once he disappeared into his room, leaving the space ours again, the tension returned like static electricity. I wanted to speak, to bridge the gap, but guilt gnawed at me. What if this was wrong? What if she, Claire, regretted even a fraction of the warmth in her glance? She didn't move away. Instead, she leaned against the counter, crossing her arms in a way that seemed casual but wasn't. Her eyes lingered, and for a moment I swore she was seeing straight into me, through my skin, my chest, my stomach, through everything I was trying to hide. I shouldn't. I stammered, words failing me. I mean, it's complicated. She tilted her head, eyebrow raised, lips twitching in a way that was both teasing and tender. "Complicated how?" she asked softly, but I could hear the question behind the question. "Do you feel it too?" I swallowed. I wanted to confess everything. The way I'd been thinking about her all week. How I'd imagined what it would feel like if I could just touch her hand without consequence. how every look she gave me left me aching. But I couldn't. Not yet. Then, almost without realizing it, we leaned closer at the same time. The air between us thickened. Her hair brushed my shoulder. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. I could smell the faint scent of her perfume, floral and warm, and I knew I wanted it closer. And then, a text buzzed from my phone. I glanced down, a message from my friend. "Can you grab my notes from my room?" I left them there. The moment shattered. We both jumped slightly. I couldn't look away. Claire was standing by the window now, sunlight catching the streaks of silver in her hair, and I realized how unfair it was that someone could be so entirely alive and yet belong somewhere I couldn't reach. My chest tightened, a mixture of longing and fear I couldn't untangle. She glanced back at me, and something in her eyes flickered. Hesitation, maybe, or warning. But there was something else, too. Desire, raw and unspoken, and my stomach knotted at the impossibility of it. I wanted to close the distance between us, to erase the inches, the years, the boundaries that made this feel forbidden. "You shouldn't," I started, voice cracking slightly. I swallowed. "We shouldn't be here. Like this." Her lips curved into that half-smile I could never read. "And yet we are," she said softly, almost a whisper. My hands itched to reach for hers, to brush the tension off her shoulders, to confirm this was real, that we weren't just imagining the gravity pulling us together. I wanted to tell her everything, the way I'd thought about her at night, the way her laugh haunted me even when she wasn't around, how I'd caught myself staring at her in class, in the cafe, on the street, anywhere she happened to be. But the words lodged in my throat, impossible to release. She took a step closer. I could feel the heat of her body, the faint scent of jasmine rising to meet me. And then, almost imperceptibly, she hesitated, eyes darting toward the hallway as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. I can't," she said, her voice trembling despite the calm she tried to fake. "I shouldn't." I swallowed hard, heart hammering. "I know," I said, almost desperately. "I know." And yet every nerve in me wanted to defy that, wanted to close the space between us and forget every rule I had just opened my mouth to speak. Maybe to convince her, maybe to confess everything, when the door swung open with a force that made the air between us shiver. Her husband. Or at least, I thought he was her husband. But the man standing there was younger than I'd imagined, fit, his eyes narrowing the moment he saw us. And worse, behind him, framed in the doorway, was my friend, holding a stack of papers, frozen mid-step, eyes wide like he'd walked straight into a private world he wasn't supposed to witness. Claire froze. My pulse jumped into my throat. I wanted to disappear into the floor. I stammered, searching for something, anything, to explain that didn't make me sound like a fool or a predator. But there was no explanation that could cover this. Her hand, almost instinctively, reached for mine, but she paused, a flash of panic crossing her face. I could feel her tension like an electric charge, radiating through my skin. Her lips parted, maybe to say something, maybe to defend herself, but the words never came. My friend's voice was low, incredulous. "Claire?" I swallowed. That question, that single name, made the air feel like it was shrinking around us. I wanted to disappear, to erase the last hour, the last look, the way my chest had been aching just moments ago. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Claire's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and in them, I saw a flash of everything we'd been trying to hide. Desire, guilt, and a fear so raw it made my stomach twist. And then, just as quickly, she stepped back, creating a chasm I could almost drown in. This isn't what it looks like," she said, but her voice trembled in a way that made me doubt even her own denial. My friend's jaw tightened. "It looks like, I don't even know," he said, glancing from Claire to me. His disbelief was palpable, and I felt a pang of shame that cut sharper than anything I'd expected. The man, her husband, if that's who the room felt impossibly small, even though it was the same living room from before. Time had slowed, and every heartbeat sounded like a drum in my chest. Claire's hand hovered near mine again, as if drawn by gravity I couldn't name. "I can't lie anymore," she whispered, voice trembling but steady. I don't want to. I froze. Every rational thought screamed at me. Wrong, forbidden, reckless. But every instinct in my body leaned toward her. I took a small step forward, and she didn't move back. Her eyes held mine, raw and unguarded, full of things she'd been trying to hide, things I had been imagining in secret. I've wanted this. I've wanted you, I said, my words spilling out before my fear could catch them. My hands were shaking. My chest ached. But it was out now. I didn't care about the age gap, about my friend, about every reason this could go wrong. I only cared that she was here, and she could see me, really see me, and maybe feel the same. Her breath hitched, and she swallowed hard. You're too young, she said, a soft protest, but her fingers brushed mine lightly. And this is dangerous. I don't care, I said, my voice cracking. I don't care about dangerous. I just want you. That's all I know. She looked down, eyes glistening. The vulnerability in her expression made my chest tighten even more. She wasn't invincible. She was human, fragile, carrying her regrets and her longing, and she was here with me. Then, as if the world had slowed to a single heartbeat, she leaned in. Not all the way, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her lips and the breath of her words. I've wanted this too, she murmured, her voice barely audible, trembling against the space between us. And then the moment fractured, the sharp sound of a door opening down the hall. My friend's voice called out, oblivious and innocent. We froze, our hands still brushed, a subtle spark that neither of us could deny, but the reality of the world pressed back in. Claire's gaze met mine one last time, a mixture of longing, guilt, and something unspoken that felt like a promise. I didn't know what would happen next. Whether we would stay, whether we would fight it, whether the moment we had just shared would become a memory or the beginning of something impossible. But in that instant, I understood her completely, and she understood me. That silent, electric understanding was ours alone. The rest could wait. Her hand slipped from mine reluctantly, and she took a step back, eyes still locked on mine. The room hummed with tension, a fragile balance between what we wanted and what we couldn't yet take. And I knew, even if the world tried to pull us apart, we had crossed a line neither of us could unsee. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog that was half dream, half reality. Claire and I didn't rush, didn't throw ourselves into something reckless. We stole moments, quiet coffee in the morning, lingering glances across the park, hands brushing on the stairwell. Every touch, every shared smile, carried the weight of what we'd almost lost and the thrill of what we'd finally allowed ourselves to find. It wasn't easy. There were moments of hesitation, guilt shadowing our laughter. My friend still didn't know, and we weren't ready to let him. The world outside was the world we couldn't control, but in those stolen spaces, everything felt sharp, clear, and real. One afternoon, we found ourselves on the balcony, the city below draped in the warm, golden haze of late afternoon. Claire leaned against the railing, fingers entwined with mine. Her gaze didn't waver, and for a moment, we just existed in the space between breaths. I've never felt seen like this, she said quietly. Her voice was a tremor, carrying everything she'd never said aloud. Her regrets, her longing, her fear, and now, her choice. I squeezed her hand. Me neither, I admitted. Not like this. Not anyone. It was messy, and it was complicated, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time, I realized that life wasn't about perfect timing or flawless circumstances. It was about the courage to reach across the lines we thought we couldn't cross. She laughed softly, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. I don't know what comes next, she said, eyes still locked on mine. But I know I don't want to walk away. Neither do I said. And for the first time in months, I felt the tight coil in my chest ease, replaced by something that felt dangerously close to peace. We stayed there, suspended between the sunlight and the approaching evening, letting the city hum beneath us. Words weren't necessary. Our fingers laced together, the warmth enough to speak everything neither of us could fully say. There would be challenges, sure. We both knew that. But in that moment, we chose each other. That choice, The messy, vulnerable, human choice was ours alone, and it was more than enough. As the sky deepened into soft purples and golds, I caught her eyes again. Something unspoken passed between us, a promise, a beginning, and the fragile thrill of new love. And I wondered,